Good afternoon, everyone. Special edition again. I guess you could call it a special edition, a special time instead of 7 o'clock tonight, doing the show today at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Last week, and again, the situation hasn't changed. There's something going on that it made sense to do the show during the day and keep the evening free. But it was a good experiment, and I learned some very, very interesting things. So the opportunity presented itself today, mostly out of necessity, and so I decided to change up the time again a little. So everyone, of course, if you join me while I'm live, that's terrific. The chat room is open if you want to say hello or chime in. Otherwise, this will be available in the archive on YouTube and LinkedIn, and then it will be on Facebook for 4 weeks, I think, before they take down the live. So welcome to those who are listening. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I'm in the middle of my Cyrus Avery tour. 10 performances or 20 performances in 10 days in Enid, Oklahoma last month. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going back to Tulsa, Oklahoma to do 2 performances. I'll talk about that after the fact, after it happens. But let's roll the opening like we always do. I'll come back. I'm going to share with you what is Chautauqua, what is living history, what is historical entertainment, what are the differences between them, the nuances. There are a lot of opinions and ideas, especially in the field itself, certainly for Chautauqua. I also have a slideshow that I'll bring up. I'll show you some of the characters that I've played over the years and what I'm up to. So welcome. Whether you're watching live, whether you're watching the archive, or whether you're listening to this audio only in about 3 weeks on Radio. All right, so let's start with what is Chautauqua. I have it there on the banner, Chautauqua. 13 years ago, the first time a colleague, I was getting my certification from the Kennedy Center in teaching to be a teaching artist, to do arts integration in the classroom. And someone that I was taking the workshop with, that I had gotten to know over the course of the week, said, have you ever done Chautauqua? And it was such a strange word, and it seems to be such a strange word for a lot of people. It is a town in New York, I believe, possibly a lake as well, but certainly a town in New York, and it's where it started. That's where it got its name, Chautauqua. So it started in 1874, and it was basically a summer school / lecture series there on the shores of the lake. All kinds of luminaries from the day, thinkers, politicians, writers, so on and so forth. People would gather, and it was very educational. If there, at the time, 1874, inadequate schooling, especially in rural areas, so you bring the information to the people. That tent tradition still does exist. It's somewhat going away, and I'll talk about that. But I'm wearing my Chautauqua from when I was in Enid during the summer program. I did the winter program for the first time. I've done the summer program twice there, and it was Enid in the park. It has since moved inside, but again, I'll talk about that and the reasoning behind it. So it was a traveling form around the country in rural areas by 1900. It included the arts, so sometimes there were play performances, theatrical performances. So this was really a nexus of education and entertainment. I don't like the word edutainment. A lot of people don't. I specifically did not use it in my labeling of this episode, but that mixture of entertainment with an educational aspect, certainly. And the form died out in the 1920s as radio came in, and then film became more popular, more accessible, as school systems grew, as education became more accessible. It kind of died out. But when you flash forward about 50 years in North Dakota, in 1976, I don't know if it was spurred by the centennial of the United States, or the the bicentennial of the United States in 1976, but that was a big deal, and that would be a perfect time to be bringing history alive as part of that celebration. Um, it was started up again, what is called now the Great Plains Chautauqua, because it was adapted in that area of the country, the Great Plains area of the country, by 1980 in its current format, which I'm going to unpack for you today. So, why is Chautauqua important? In a very general way, it's really a powerful form of civic engagement and civil dialogue. Civil, we don't have enough in our dialogue. And sometimes out of Chautauqua, the dialogue isn't always civil. People get upset, they get into it. If you did a really good job, sometimes the lines are a little blurred. And I've collected stories from colleagues over the years where they've been confronted. I was only confronted once, and it was after one of my workshops. I was very much me. But I put something out there about Che Guevara that someone just didn't want to hear, even though the scholarship and all was there. And she was waving papers, almost gave me a paper cut on my nose. So interesting enough. But civic engagement, they're there for the living history. That's why they're there, to learn about this historical character from the point of view of the character, but then also able to talk to the scholar, which is what I absolutely love. I mentioned Enid, one of my absolute favorite historians of Chautauqua, a very, very passionate man who I wasn't able to see. He was out of town getting some surgery, but Dr. John Provine really helped to start the program. Enid says here since 1994, the Winter Chautauqua, where I was able to go into 20 schools over 2 weeks, is sort of Enid's brand. It's a wonderful thing. It was wonderful to get back to the kids, and they're very proud of that, and rightfully so. And I'd been wanting to do it for years, so I was very honored to be able to do it again. So Chautauqua now, like so many other things, so many other art forms, and it is very much an art form to me and to a lot of my colleagues. They're shrinking humanities funding, or it's gone away completely. That has really hurt Chautauqua, although hopefully it will open up doors to a broader array of scholar performers. And again, I'll talk about that. It's harder. I'm one of the youngest Chautauquans at 56 years old. For a while, I was the youngest when I first started doing this 13 years ago. But someone younger than me got into it. Also, the audiences are getting older. They're aging out, so they're shrinking. Or they're part of the reason why it's not done under the tent in many places is because you don't want to ask people in their 70s, 80s to be sitting out in the wind, the weather. Sometimes it's just easier to move it, to just have it inside because, a big rainstorm or something with the tent, then you have to move everything in. The tent's been bought, rented, put up, which is a big thing. And there's a lot of safety issues that need to be accounted for with all of that. So more and more it's moving inside, but I have been able to do Chautauqua under the big tent. It is a wonderful experience. It's a wonderful experience for the performers, wonderful experience for the audience as well. So I'm glad that I got to do that, but it does open opportunities for partnerships. So Enid, instead of in the park now, it's at the university, which is a wonderful partnership, and they have a great space. And I had a wonderful time this Saturday night that I performed there, and I did both my workshops at the university too, and the turnout was wonderful. So that was a terrific thing. In Enid, in front of the tent, was a performance platform where you stood, and right behind you was a historic one-room schoolhouse. That was a neat place to kind of get your head together, do the pre-show, and all of that cool kind of thing. So, of course, anytime that an art form is having challenges, drawing audience, drawing performers, there's a lot of fingers pointed, there's voices raised about how it happened, what to do about it, and if it is worth it. Absolutely, it is worth it. There aren't too many people, I think, who are involved in Chautauqua and who have been, who say, oh, well, its time has come, it's not worth it anymore. In some ways, it's more important than ever. It's a live experience. There's really nothing technological about it. Every once in a while, they'll bend the rules a little for someone if they have a very specific reason to do a slideshow presentation, but that is typically not part of what goes on at all. It's very immersive to try to take people back in history. There's usually some set dressing. I had a funny experience with set dressing doing in a theater, because you do this in all kinds of venues. You do it in libraries. I did it in a library in Enid, which was wonderful. In proper theaters, traditional theaters, which is an interesting experience, but I'll get to that later. One of the funny things, and really there are camps or divisions. So you have your pure historians. It was very much humanities driven when the Great Plains Chautauqua came out, and so these are people with PhDs in history and your different humanities, or master's degrees in history, very specific things, and they didn't like the idea of actors. They would say, hey, look, this is not a performance. This is a presentation. It's a lecture in costume. I didn't know that. I don't even know if that would have been so concerned of me when I was hired to do my first performances. I worked with a mix of PhDs, of people with masters, and then people with theater backgrounds. And there's plenty of overlap between people with history and literature advanced degrees and performers. So you have that there as well. Hardcore historians will call Chautauqua history light, which I'm sure they will absolutely call living history, and they will call historical entertainment, all the different forms that my work in this field takes, as history light. And there are a lot of factors for that. And sometimes it is a little history light because there just isn't enough information about the people. But there is too. So that's, I'm trying to, there's always a lot of discussion, and sometimes there's finger pointing and sometimes there's lines in the sand. There are places where I cannot perform, that I am not invited. I am not asked to submit an application. So just like with actors, sometimes you have to audition, you have to do an application, all that. Sometimes you just get invited because of your reputation. There are some people that just will not, because I don't have the right letters after my name. To me, that was a crisis when it first happened, because some people lost some humanities funding, and I came to realize, hey, that is not my problem. If I was invited, my job is to show up, and I can't change history. I can't change the decisions that I made about my education. I'm perfectly comfortable with those decisions. So again, humanities scholars say no actors. But that is starting to change a little bit out of necessity, because there aren't as many of these humanities scholars who want to do this thing, but also because audiences respond really well to it. And I will, like I said, as I go, I'm kind of scaffolding this, so I will unpack that more. That Chautauqua isn't, theater, they'll tell you. It is lecture in costume. I've seen a lecturer in costume standing at a podium, and it is a lecture. They just happen to be wearing a costume. That's the way I put it. And it just doesn't work. You will hear presentation, program, performance. I call them performances. What I did in the schools were a little bit more of programs, but they were interactive. They were really interactive theater performances, because that's like how I like to do it. And the response was very good, is what I know. So any of these things that I've just kind of laid out for you, and I am moving beyond them now to get into the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of how this thing works, which is much more interesting to me. Are these things right or wrong? The audience matters most to me, the audience response. And I get consistently good responses from audiences. And that is really, to me, what matters. Are they moved? Are they motivated to act? I'm very happy to say that people have come to my workshops, but especially my performances, and then wrote articles for the newspaper, wrote editorials, wrote me letters that I have then collected, or emails to say thank you. This really moved me. I never thought of this in this way before, and we've had some wonderful conversations. So that's what matters to me. One of the workshops that I did as part of when I played Che Guevara, in 2019 in a 3-city tour in Oklahoma, was about Che, Augusto Boal, and Paulo Freire. And really, it is is the audience moved to act. I also put Bertolt Brecht in there. Never forget that it's theater. We're not trying to trick anybody. It's so minimalist you can't forget or get mistaken, and suddenly you think, you get transported in that way that theater does, and you shouldn't, because the audience should be moved to talk about it. They have an opportunity to talk about it with you and with the character, which is wonderful. It's my favorite thing actually about Chautauqua. So like I said, I first got into this 13 years ago. Pure Chautauqua. I've done Louis Emilio. I've done Che Guevara. I've done Samuel Bellamy. I've done Mariano Vallejo. I've done Allen Ginsberg, and I've done Cyrus Avery. In the larger world of living history and historical entertainment, I've also done Edgar Allan Poe and a bunch of his characters, and I've done 8 different pirates in the golden age of piracy in the early 1700s, which is a really rich time for education, for politics, for socioeconomics, all of that different kind of thing. So let's talk about so the basis for this, and you can read the pure essay if you want to. It's at my joymediawriter.blogspot.com. You can read that if you want. But this is based on an essay that I wrote at the end of 2019. After that happened with people were very upset. What the hell is he doing here? He doesn't even have a degree. He costs us money through the humanities. As far as I know, because nobody said it to my face or even secondhand, nobody complained after my performances, after they saw the work I could do. And so I wrote an essay. It was about 6 pages. So it was probably about 5,000 words, maybe. Form, function, and future of Chautauqua. And I broke it down, as I do almost everything, into 3 acts. So the first act I called the form. So here is what modern Chautauqua, Great Plains Chautauqua, really is and consists of. It comprises a monologue from the point of view of the character. Where in their life you do this monologue is almost always up to you. Some Chautauquas are free form. They just bring people that they want to see, that they think their audiences would like. Some are a very, very broad theme, and some are a very, very specific theme. So of course, if you're celebrating, 1955, then the character is going to be speaking from 1955. So there are a lot of things. I'll tell you my process of selecting all this. I'll tell you as I get there. The monologue lasts usually 35 to 50 minutes. Mine typically go 52 to 54 minutes or so, which is a little bit long. I know a few Chautauquans that will really press into the hour, but I try to keep it to be about 50 minutes. Most are about 40. Cyrus Avery, who I'm doing right now, Cyrus runs to 53, 54 minutes, but Cyrus could easily be 75 minutes. But the audience has a lot of questions, and the Q&A was very rich. So I keep that in mind as I'm going. Of course, for schools almost inevitably are running on like a 40 to 45 minute period. So it was a little shorter, but you're also dealing with younger people's attention span. So that's all fine. You're sometimes asked to do workshops. So in Oklahoma, you do the performance and you're responsible for 2 one-hour workshops. And so that is very fun, to do a PowerPoint presentation. I typically do something that is adjacent to the story, like with Che Guevara. These guys who are socio-communist minded educators, liberators, politicians, philosophers. So Paulo Freire and Augusto Boal, I was able to bring theater, my theater training, my theater philosophy, my theater work into it with all of that. But then you do something sometimes maybe that's purely fun. My second workshop for Che was the cult of Che, and showing like Giselle Bündchen, or however you say that model's name, with Che on her bikini, which is silly, or guys who are worth millions of dollars with lots of gold jewelry and diamonds and all wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt, and nothing is further from the truth. Also, too, I have a wonderful collection from people of when they go to Cuba and see all the portraits and monuments and the murals to Che Guevara. They send me their pictures. So I have a wonderful, wonderful collection of that. So I've included some of that. For some, they have a reader, so you need to do an essay. That, of course, is very scholarly with references. It's done in an MLA style or Chicago manual of style, very erudite. But still, though, let the audience make it accessible, so it's not that academic. I usually do pretty good with those essays because I've written so many blogs, I've written so many articles, and I've been an editor for academic journals for almost 30 years now. So the part that I really love is after you do the monologue, then you have an opportunity to do Q&A with the audience. That will run in 2 segments. So to me, it's almost like a 3-act play too. So you have the monologue, you have Q&A with the character. So Cyrus Avery, for instance, I'm doing him in the winter of 1927, and I have very specific reasons for wanting to do that. The end of the arc becomes very compelling about something horrible that happened to him and terribly unfair because of his beliefs and because of his morality and because of his social activism. But also, it transitions him from Route 66 and the highway system to what he called the highway of the sky, airplanes. So that's where I put it there. No one can ask me any questions or any character that are later than what they are talking about. So I did get a very clever question in Enid when I was performing at the university, the main stage performance, about rumblings of what would become the Great Depression a couple of years later. And so I could carefully, what you don't want to do is you have this information, so not be too clever about packing what you're talking about, but knowing what's going on and what the rumblings are, and going from there and handling that. Oftentimes, and it did not happen once in 20 performances, not at the library, not at the university, and none of the kids. Nobody asked Cyrus Avery how or when he died, but that will usually happen almost every performance. Some MCs and moderators are very good about reminding the audience, and sometimes they'll still do it. When I did Samuel Bellamy in Boulder City, Nevada, last November, someone asked Sam how he died. And I was able to work it in. Since he's a pirate, there's superstition. There's a lot of superstition at sea anyway, nautical. I've done programs about that live and podcasts. I was able to just say, "Oh, do you know how I'm going to die? Tell me." "No, don't tell me." "Are you a witch?" So you can make a joke out of it. Most characters can't do that. Usually the moderator will have to step in, or sometimes folks just ignore it and move on and say, I'll take another question. And then of course are very apologetic when they loop back to explain, and typically will lead with, "Let me tell you how this person died." Because sometimes it's very tragic or very, very, very interesting. So I love the Q&A, and then you get to do, typically you take off something. So for Cyrus Avery, I wear a fedora almost totally so that I have something to make that transition. It helps me as the actor, and it also helps the audience. So seeing me for over an hour with that fedora on, and I take it off as I become me. Allen Ginsberg, I took off the glasses. Che, I took off the beret. There's different things that you can do for different characters. Sam Bellamy, I take off the tricorn hat. So typically a hat is a great easy thing for me. So because you have to do the Q&A, and I love this, it puts you in the realm of improvisation, but you have to know way more about that character than would ever fit in a 50-minute monologue, never mind like a 35-minute monologue. And that's, as writers and as actors, we need to do that anyway. We need to know much more about our characters than the audience is ever going to see, but it drives us. It answers questions for us. It helps us build the arc. So when I talk about how I write one of these, how I construct these, I'll talk about more of that. Really, for Cyrus Avery, I could easily do 90 minutes with Cy just talking to the audience. He is that fascinating. He is that energetic. He is that much of a polymath and a Renaissance man that there are innumerable things that he can talk about. So speaking of that, then how do you do that? How do you craft this, let's just call it a 50-minute piece, because that's what I tend to do. This one, which I call a one-man show. That's how I I attack it. I attack it as it's a one-man show and it's a theater piece because I lose nothing from that and I gain a whole bunch. One of the big deterrents, I think, and why it's hard to get Chautauqua scholars, especially very good ones, is it's time-consuming research. I spend anywhere from 18 months to 2 years. And really, I was told early on, you may be debuting this tonight, but it will constantly change form. You will constantly be learning. And that's the truth. The characters that I do over and over again, they're always changing. And as I was doing Psy over those 20 performances, I was constantly researching, sometimes on site. Somebody would tell me something or have an opportunity for an educational moment. So two of the schools that I was at, their chaperones, their mascots were Mustangs. And Cy talks about the second stage in human transportation, of course, is horses. So I looked up the origin of Mustang, and I was really glad that I did. A Spanish word, mustaño, wild, unfettered, owned by no one. And I was able to teach the kids mustaño, tell them it's spelled like mustano, except the N has that little squiggly line over it. Of course, the cedilla, mustaño. It's a beautiful word, and to get the kids saying that and they're learning something new is a wonderful thing. So it's very, very fluid. They will take different forms depending on who the person is, the process, at least for me, and I would guess that most of my colleagues will agree with this. If like Che Guevara, if like Allen Ginsberg, they did a ton of first person writing, Allen through his poetry, but other books that he wrote and essays, and he was a teacher. Che wrote a lot of books, and that was wonderful. I prefer that. Cyrus, I had to go to his letters in the archives, his speeches, and there was enough material there to get a sense of his syntax, to get a sense of his language. But that's also where the gatekeeping comes into, it's not actors and it's history light. And any actor can learn to research. I went to graduate school for a while. I've always been good at researching. I do a lot of historical novels. I spend a lot of time in the library. I know how to use archives. I know how to distinguish between first person and second person sources, all of that kind of thing. Like I said, I typically get high marks for my essays. There are skill sets that you can bring. They're maybe not innate skill sets, but they certainly can be learned. So I think for my money, it's much easier to teach a really good actor, a really good historical presenter, especially if they have writing skills, how to do research and what that should look like, how to know when you're exhaustive or fairly exhaustive in your research. That's just how I feel about that. So let's see. So let's continue on here. Sorry, my papers are getting stuck together. So that's why I say to humanities scholars with advanced degrees in their accepted fields, their strength, what they lead with is their research. And I worked with humanities scholars who wrote entire books on the characters that they've portrayed. So they're going to have a leg up on that one, but the rest of us can get there. So the writing approach, I use it just as I would use in theater. So what I'm first looking for is a complex, interesting character with lots of layers and a clear arc. There has to be some kind of change in circumstances, in personality, in life events, in philosophy, that will sustain the audience and carry them through 50 minutes of material. So that's what I have to look for. So I like controversy. I like contradiction. I like characters with flaws who are very human. And I talk about this a lot. I'm working on the second edition of the Everyday is a Story All Its Own book. And I'm going to really kind of expand on this because it fascinates me. We want to find the humanity in the character. That is what's interesting. If you know anything about Che Guevara, you know that he's extremely, extremely controversial. I didn't choose him for that reason, but it was a great draw to me. What I'm trying to say is I don't do some of the characters I do as a big middle finger up to people who dislike them or to political lineman or anything like that, or to the education system. That would be stupid and just shooting myself in the foot. So obviously, the more controversial the character, the higher the stakes are, higher the expectations are. And if you're showing up just to do it, to be a rebel or to cause trouble, folks are going to catch on to that, and you are not going to be invited back. I can tell you that for sure. But to find that angle, to find that entry, to find that controversy, and make it useful, to help the audience see a different point of view. Che and Alan were both super, super critical of the United States. So how do you stand in front of U.S. audiences, especially in conservative places where sometimes we go? Not every place that we're asked to perform or where Chautauqua exists is by any means liberal or left-leaning at all. Some places are ultra-conservative. Some places are very near to military bases, and you do in Che Guevara. What does that look like? Well, there were some threats. There were some nasty emails. There was some security for me. There was also some security when I did Allen Ginsberg. So standing on that platform in front of the one-room schoolhouse, there was a cop 6 feet behind me. I think Alan would have loved that. I had a decision to make. Do I draw attention to the cop? And I chose not to do that. And I stand by that. I'm glad that I did, because there's that line, and people can see, and it's there, and he was in the field while I was in the field, and in the field of vision. So the idea is to humanize them. I just watched Nuremberg, which is super, super, super powerful. Got a little pushback because people are quick to say, well, watch Judgment at Nuremberg, it's better. It's different. It's different. They're both powerful. And this idea of this Douglas Kelly, who interviewed Goering, then wound up committing suicide because nobody would accept his thesis that fascism was something that was going to happen over and over again, and this wasn't an isolated incident. That was absolutely fascinating. So it's a different creature. It had different missions. And I talk about this historical adaptation stuff in blogs. You can seek those out in episodes of this podcast. You can go ahead and seek it out. So I'm not going to lay on it here. What's important is the character, not the themes. The character is the most important. I'm reading now, and this is going to go in the second edition of Every Day is a Story, but I'm rereading Les Miserables. And just like George Bernard Shaw, Victor Hugo was very much a political activist. He was exiled for a while from France for his political views when the wrong person was in office for his political views. He was exiled from France actually for 20 years. And he said that people will come for the very compelling characters, and they will stay and get something out of the larger socio-historical. I've just finished, right before I read Les Miserables, I reread Tale of Two Cities. Those characters are incredibly, incredibly compelling. Characters like Madame Defarge and the complexities of the man who ultimately goes to the guillotine. Very, very compelling characters. The doctor who was wrongfully imprisoned in the Bastille and turned to shoemaking. Extremely, extremely, extremely. Sidney, of course, is the character who goes to the guillotine. A far better thing than I do now than I have ever done. A far better place I go to than I have ever known. Just amazing, amazing stuff. So characters, not themes. That's what interests me. But the theme needs to be there. And the theme, you're not there unless you match the theme. So whatever that theme happens to be, that's why you were hired in the first place in most. I like the complexity. Okay, so more than controversy, I like complexity. And I just finished reading a couple last week. My episode was on books that I've been reading, including actor autobiographies, because I really want to expand the actor section of Every Day is a Story for the second edition. Tim Curry talks a lot in his autobiography and his memoir about contradiction. And I love that. Anybody worth talking to is going to have some contradictions. Contradiction, it's hair splitting, but it's different than inconsistency. They're just things that don't quite mesh. I have become very fond in my life of saying things are not mutually exclusive. So you're talking to someone about something, and they go to something that's adjacent. That doesn't negate what you're talking about. It's adjacent. They're not mutually exclusive. They can coexist without a lot of cognitive dissonance. That really gets me. Che Guevara was an MD. He was a doctor, yet he was a revolutionary. He was a soldier. He was a guerrilla. He wrote books on guerrilla tactics that Kennedy got then a hold of, and had the Green Berets incorporate those ideas. That kind of thing is very, very interesting to me. So those are the characters that I try to seek out. Cyrus Avery is probably, Cy is complex as anybody, but he's less contradictory, and he's controversial only if you hold certain opinions, social, moral opinions, then you would find him controversial. But he was a guy who was incredibly complex. Like I say, was a polymath, was a Renaissance man, who was someone who equally valued life at home with his family and out on the lecture tour and being on the top of a hotel making guarantees that he didn't tell anybody he was going to make, and had no idea how he was going to do it. He only knew that he was going to do it. I am closest to Cy in age, in nationality, in background, in interests. That is the smallest gap that I've ever had with any of my characters, and I really enjoy playing him. He's funny, and he's so wise, and the quotes that he uses resonate so much with me. And I've sort of lent him some historical quotes that I think, there's no evidence in the archives that he ever used these quotes, but I would be almost positive that he would be aware of them, and he would certainly agree with them. So let's see. So again, as you're writing this thing, you're looking for a narrative arc. You're looking for a change. You're looking for a build. You're looking for unifying themes. So not only the meta theme of the program, I always look to, if it's a certain era, like we did in 2021 in Oklahoma, we did Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll. So it was Timothy Leary, it was Allen Ginsberg, it was Christopher Isherwood, it was Mama Cass, and it was John Lennon. So some of these people knew each other. So that's fun too. Allen knew Isherwood, of course. Allen knew Timothy Leary. They were involved in a while with the whole LSD movement and all of that. So those kinds of things are fun. So you have the meta theme. I would say you have, sometimes you have the meso theme. So you have the macro theme, you have the meso theme, linking individual characters together, and then you have the micro themes, which are unique to your character, their expression of how they reacted, how they behaved, the decisions that they made, how their characters' actions represent their psychology. Che is fascinating because he couldn't stand to be bored. Not for a second. His mind was way too active, and he could not stand ambivalence or ambiguity. That's where Che and I, as different as we can be, that's where we are very, very alike. Also, to my overblown sense, my highly developed sense of social justice is another place where we overlap. But I understand. I cannot stand boredom. I cannot stand sitting around for even a minute, and I certainly can't understand. I can't handle ambiguity, so I will reach out to somebody and get clarification or find out what is going on, even if it's uncomfortable for them, because I won't want that ambiguity, because it leads to assumptions, and it's just a bad thing. So anyhow, I like to use humor. I like to use drama. I like to play a lot of different notes, so a lot of emotions will be manifest. I do not want to say, because I disagree with those who teach in the theater, that emotion is the pursuit. Emotion in some ways is none of our business. The character is pursuing something. I talk about it a lot, a gap between where they are and what they want. Depending on the obstacles that they meet along the way and the experiences that they have, emotions will be created. Emotions are a byproduct of a character trying to get what they want. So I make sure to talk about a lot of different things that characters want. If they just want one thing, they're probably only going to have a byproduct of a certain emotion. If they're having a great, amazing time, they're going to be happy and they're going to be fun and they're going to be wonderful. If they hit some obstacles on the way, some other emotions might surface, might manifest. But hitting on different points, different people in their life who maybe they love deeply or they absolutely despised and didn't get along with, who tried to destroy you or trying to destroy them. That's where you will get that richness. That's where you will get that drama. That's where you will get a lot of different notes. You're playing a lot of different notes. I have seen many Chautauquans who do what they do. They do it pretty well, but they only play one note over the course of that 45 to 50 minutes. Very few people, especially people who have survived through history, are famous, for lack of a better word, well known enough to be a Chautauqua character. We're not boring people who only played a single note. I can guarantee you that. Sometimes you go chronologically, especially from your entry point. So, okay, so it's February of 1927, or I'm going to take you back and I'm going to give you the history of transportation in the United States in the case of Che. Not Che, I'm sorry, but Cyrus Avery. Che, I did not do chronologically. Allen Ginsberg, I didn't do chronologically. I did them thematically and group the things that way. It's a good way to. I like to have reveals. I like to have surprises. We know that something has just happened to Cy, but he doesn't reveal kind of until he gets there chronologically what it is that happened to him. And notice I'm not telling you what happened to him, so you'll have to find it out. So to keep that out, or if anybody's watching this who I'm going to be performing for in the next year, I don't want it ruined for them. So I talk about this a lot in the podcast that I do where I focus on acting. We are not doing an impersonation. That is not the goal. There are no audio or video of Cy Avery whatsoever, and I've only been able to find maybe 6 or 7 photographs of Cy. So that makes it really, really hard. Alan, of course, did all kinds of interviews on television, all kinds of presentations, radio shows. There's abundance. Same thing with Che. There are his presentation that he made, which was famous, to the United Nations, things that you could watch. You could hear their voice. You can practice their voice. You can do that because I believe I want to do that. I want to have the voice of the character. I want to look like them when I show you the slideshow presentation, to just show you my commitment to look like these people, to sound like these people. With Cy too, I knew that he doesn't have a classic Oklahoma sort of drawl, but he's also from the 1920s. He also went to a liberal arts college. He also did elocution. I thought that the mid-Atlantic accent would be totally wrong for him. Cy was way too down to earth for that, even though he was educated, even though he hobnobbed with millionaires. So it was through the syntax. It was reading his letters, taking out common words, looking at phrases, and getting an idea. Now, I get a little hepped up as I do him. He gets excited about things. I get excited about things. So a little bit, maybe of what could be a drawl, but it's more of an excitement and a yawl and a friendliness and inviting people in. So there's a distinction there with Louis Emilio, one of the characters I played. He was from the 54th Massachusetts, so a bit of a New England accent there, forward 54th, and tells his story there about the storming of Fort Wagner and with African-American troops that he was in command of, and the challenges and all with that. Again, too, when you leave that accent behind the trigger as you talk to the audience, sometimes there's a real surprise. And that happens a lot when I do my living history and my historical there, I said the word edutainment, but my historical entertainment, when I do the Scottish character, Angus McGregor, right? So Angus here will talk sometimes for a very long time in the Scottish accent. And then when I just become me, there's a big surprise. So I like all of that. That helps the immersion. I was trying to get Che, and I couldn't get him. I had the hair right. I had the beard right, the angles of the beard and all, and I was looking at myself, and my face was the right shape. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? I was panicking. It was like a week before, and I realized that Che had this space in his mustache. And as soon as I took that out, shaved that between. Now, with Allen Ginsberg, there was some talk about, oh, Joey goes pretty far. Is he going to artificially shave his hairline? And I was actually thinking about doing that. But somebody told me probably at your age it won't grow back, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. So anyhow, so that was one thing with Alan, but I am going to show you those slides in a little bit as we go. So you're not doing an impersonation, as I talk about in Every Day is a Story All Its Own, and here on the podcast when I talk about acting related things. Sam Rockwell and Philip Seymour Hoffman, who both played wonderfully, Chuck Barris and Truman Capote, respectively. They were doing an interpretation of that person, but it's also an interpretation of the writer and director's interpretation of that person. So it's a nesting egg, it's a Matryoshka doll of what you're trying to do there. So I am not, sometimes I'll say, oh, I'm channeling a little bit of them. That's more about things that they would say, phrases that they had, a certain way that they would walk or hold their hand, something like that. And sometimes it will hold on for a little bit. But typically getting at a costume and moving on, that will kind of go way too. But you do sort of want them to speak to you. I did make a pilgrimage. I felt very strongly about making a pilgrimage to Cyrus Avery's gravesite. When I was in Enid, I went to Tulsa when Tanya and I were on our way home, and I felt really strongly about that. And I was glad that I was able to do that. Thank him. Just kind of say, I hope I'm doing justice to you. And, with his family is all laid out there, and I hope I'm doing, justice to his name and how he felt about you. But like with so many things that I talk about in this storytelling mode, this art and craft of storytelling, it's really a dance between the analytical and the intuitive. So you use the analytical to get all those pieces out, to do your research. What goes in, what stays out becomes increasingly intuitive. I will switch gear with an audience. That was another thing. Some people do a script, they write a script, they memorize the script. The first time that I did Chautauqua, it was insisted upon that a monologue was written, given, submitted, approved, revised, all of that kind of stuff. I don't like that experience as much. I like to do index cards, but I put stuff in and out. Cyrus Avery has been a completely different creature. Doing for elementary school, doing for a library audience, doing middle school students, doing high school audience, doing a college main stage adult audience. You're not going to give them the same product and have a snowball's chance in hell of having any success. So I wound up doing numerous versions. So what I wound up doing was writing out these speeches as if Cy was writing these speeches, and then I write them over. So I go back into rehearsal next week. Cy's stuff is still pretty clear in my head after doing it 20 times in 10 days, not that long ago, and rehearsing it. But I'm going to start by rewriting that monologue and then going from there. But the two performances are very different. So I'm doing a fundraiser, which is Chautauqua, but it's also a fundraiser for a Chautauqua group. So I want it to be a little lighter, a little more fun, because it's not a straight Chautauqua piece. And then I'm doing a high school. I'm very honored to doing a high school that has a direct relation to Cy in the town where he was from, that he had an impact on the folks who were constellated around that high school. And that is going to need to be different than the fundraiser performance. So we'll see. I'm formulating what stays in, what goes out, waiting to hear how long the school performance is going to be, because it's probably going to be shorter than the other performance. So doing a script in certain cases absolutely will not work. Act 2 is really the function. What is this for? It's for education. It's for civic engagement. It's for civil dialogue. And I already mentioned bringing in the certain people, Bertolt Brecht's work, Augusto Boal's work, Paulo Freire's work. The Q&A will tell you a lot about how successful you're being, how much the people trust the character to ask really hard questions. I was doing Allen Ginsberg, and the very first question I got, and it was from a college professor, was, "Have you ever had a real job?" As if being a poet and being a political activist was not a real job. So there has to be a certain level of trust. Che, of course, got all kinds of hard questions about, and a lot of opinions, not even questions about how socialism will never work and democratic socialism will never work, and pretty harsh things said to him about his opinions about the United States and the perceptions of what did or did not go on during the Cuban Revolution and its aftermath. Che has been the baby that's been thrown out of the bathwater in a few things, and of course, like I said, the lady who almost gave me a paper cut on my nose, the idea was the CIA involved in Che's assassination? Yes, I believe that the historical record shows without a doubt, but there are people who will absolutely, absolutely deny that or not want to hear it. Act three, the future. Chautauqua scholars are truly extraordinary people. All of them have some inclination to be a performer, to stand in front of people, even if it's in a costume, and ask them to go back in time with them. They have to be good researchers. They have to be good improvisationalists. They have to be very organized. They need to be disciplined. You're also touring, and you don't have a manager, and you don't have a tour manager, and you don't have an agent. So you have to work with people, and you show up at places, and maybe it's not ideal, and maybe the sound system isn't what you've been promised. So and you have to navigate that and not make enemies. And when you're touring into schools and all, there's a huge level of trust there. There's security things. There's a lot of paperwork that has to be filled out. So you need to show up and be exactly who you say you are, but you're also representing the hiring organization. You don't want to make them look foolish. You don't want to, the last thing that you want to do is be the last person who ever did Chautauqua in that town or that school or that venue, because you screwed it up, because your work wasn't good, or you didn't make them see the value in it, or your behavior was aberrant. So I take all of that seriously. So what do we need? We need to be exacting in what we do, and that can be exhausting. It's difficult to recruit new Chautauquans, and I think all of those reasons that I've talked about today are the reasons why. But again, none of these skills are a mystery religion. I've been happy to serve as an advisor, as a consultant for people who want to start Chautauqua training programs. I've talked to young people who are doing Chautauqua, try to do some mentoring as far as that kind of thing goes. Training is going to be key to kind of demystify it, let those doors open, allow it to be somewhere between a presentation, a lecture, and a performance. Allow theater folks in. They can prove to you if they can research. If they have a resume that speaks to that, so much the better. Then it really is a non-issue, because it's very hard to get into schools now due to No Child Left Behind, Race at the Top, and other teach to the test government programs, which have really diminished. It's harder to get in schools now because it's well, does this meet the standards? Well, let me tell you, I understand the standards. I can tell you if I'm asked. I can write what standards that it meets. And Cyrus Avery, he's talking about language. He's talking about history. He's talking about economics. He's talking about transportation. He's talking about social economics and racial relations. He's talking about a lot of different kinds of things. It's meeting a lot in the curriculum. The one thing I do want to caution is about, and we run into this on both sides of the microphone, I guess you could say, from the audience and from performers, but there are dangers of seeing the past through the modern moral lens. Oh, they didn't know any better. You didn't, or this and that. It's not that. And I think we're in very, very morally complex times where we definitely don't want to limit our experience, our understanding of the past. Have we grown out of some pretty horrible moral and social things? Yes, we have. Are we still in the midst of some pretty horrible social and moral things? Yes, we are. So again, Chautauqua can help bridge some of those gaps. So I want to not spend too much more time, take more of your time. So I'm going to just put this slideshow out there and just real quick and just sort of show you this. So here's Louis Emilio, his first character I ever played, Captain Abolitionist, 54th Massachusetts. If you know the movie Glory, then you know the regiment, the 54th. Emilio, I don't think there's even an actor who's credited as him being one of the captains, but he wrote a book about his experiences, which was invaluable and made him a good character for this. Here's what I would call my historical entertainment, in some ways pure theater and living history. And this is my Edgar Allan Poe, A Haunted Life, where Edgar Allan Poe comes in the third act. He talks to the audience. He handles all the Q&A. That character there on the left, and I apologize to the radio audience, to the audio only audience at Earth, but you can always find this on YouTube or my Facebook page or on my LinkedIn. Or just write to me and I'll send you the picture if you want. But I did Auguste Dupin, who's setting up, trying to understand what was fact and fiction about Poe's life, his drug abuse, all those different kinds of things, and the mystery around his death. And I also did 5 of his unreliable narrators. So Cast of Amontillado, Telltale Heart, Pit in the Pendulum, Mask of the Red Death. So there's 3 of them there. There's Usher. There's Montresor from Cast of Amontillado, and also Telltale Heart. So there's that. Moving on, Che Guevara. So 3 pictures at the top are Che. 3 pictures at the bottom are me. I've done Che for a couple of different organizations. One on film during when we all had to stay home. I still don't know what words you can say and what you can't say on a podcast, but when we all had to stay home in 2020, it was moved to online. So I actually filmed it and then they could see it. And then we did a live Q&A, which was wonderful. That was really, really fun. And then these pictures from my friend Rob Houston in Enid Runs Visit Enid, sent me these pictures. I didn't think I had some really great pictures of Che, and these are just outstanding. And you can see there's a lot of different emotion going on, these different things. There, of course, the pirate stuff, which again, so Sam there, that is from, I was out in California in Pleasanton in the theater. And that was proper Chautauqua. So Sam, I will take and do proper Chautauqua. I've done him in Boulder City. I've done him in Ashland, Ohio. I've done Sam in lots of places. Did him online as well for some libraries in different places again in 2020. But then some of the other characters that I play, short films, living history, historic sites, lectures, all different kinds of things. Most of those pictures are from my time in Beaufort, where I created him. Mariano Vallejo, who was instrumental in California's independence. I did him. That was a unique thing where I only had a few weeks to get it together. I had to film it at home. I kind of tried to make the background look a little like I'm in a chapel in an old Californian town. So that was a completely different experience. It was just when I played Allen Ginsberg. So there's Allen to the left, me to the right. I put up some other pictures here of Allen. Did the best I could. The only thing was the hairline, as you can see, but just wasn't ready to do that. But 2 people told me that they had seen Allen Ginsberg read his poetry, and it was like having Allen there again, and that was wonderful. And also through a number of circumstances and a little bit 11th hour, a little bit under great pressure, but a great honor to have the permission and the cooperation of the Wiley Agency, who represents Allen's literary works, and also from the Allen Ginsberg Project and Estate, who saw the work I was doing, read my script, and said, yeah, we're okay with this. So that was amazing. That was a wonderful thing to be able to say. And then, of course, Cyrus Avery. Cy on the left there, me on the right. I've come pretty close. We're not exact, but pretty close. I lost 45 pounds to play Cy. Still have a little to go, but got a lot closer in the last year anyway. And there's some pictures from I think from a high school, from a middle school, and from the library when I was just in Enid. So some of the different moods and looks of Cyrus Avery. So there you go. So that's it. So next week, thank you so much, Sandra. I appreciate it. next week I'm going to have my brother Chris on, and we're going to talk about story in a way that we kind of have before, but only under the Into the Outer Realms brand of story in the Bible. Chris is studying to be a minister. He gives presentations or talks or delivers messages or sermons. We recall already two nights a month at his church, but he's getting his associates. He's going to go on and get his bachelor's, and he's really going to talk about his journey, so the story of his journey, and also how he uses the Bible stories in his life and is in his teaching and his work now. So I hope you will join me for that. So thank you all, and we'll talk to you soon. The week after that, I'll be back on tour as Cyrus. But then when I come back, I have some really great guests lined up for you for April, May. It's going to be amazing, I promise you.